Jameson would like to welcome you aboard this flight to Dublin and to invite you to join their unofficial call to bring pro football to Ireland. Stow any foam fingers in the overhead compartments, and a bar cart stocked with Jameson's finest whiskey will be making its way down the aisle after takeoff, because only Jameson would try to bring football to a whole new country. Join the Jameson Huddle at jamesonsports.com. Taste responsibly. Copyright 2024. Imported by John Jameson Import Company. New York, New York.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
I felt a lot more efficient, fresh. I did more. I watched probably more film because I was able to take, like, after 2 hours or whatever it is, I'd go on a walk with my wife or take my son outside and we'd go throw the ball around. They come back in. And so I was a lot more present for my family. I felt a lot more fresh and it just seemed a lot more efficient.
In this episode of the season, presented by Vertical Rays, Craig Stutzmann, offensive coordinator at San Jose State, joins us to talk about maintaining focus and preventing burnout as we reach the season's midpoint. We discuss strategic breaks, including San Jose State's Sundays off approach and the significance of red zone preparation. Coach Stutzmann shares his ideas on the double huddle system to enhance practice efficiency and player development. We also talk about the importance of innovative strategies for team health and competitiveness throughout the season. Our partner in this episode is Vertical Rays. Be sure to check out the link in the show notes and learn more about Vertical Rays and their digital platform, which can help you bring your fundraising to new heights.
Jameson would like to welcome you aboard this flight to Dublin and to invite you to join their unofficial call to bring pro football to Ireland. Stow any foam fingers in the overhead compartments, and a bar cart stocked with Jameson's finest whiskey will be making its way down the aisle after takeoff, because only Jameson would try to bring football to a whole new country. Join the Jameson Huddle at jamesonsports.com. Taste responsibly. Copyright 2024. Imported by John Jameson Import Company. New York, New York.
On today's episode of the Coach and Coordinator podcast, we focus on some things that affect us as we head into the middle of the season. And one of those is definitely, how do we stay fresh as coaches? How do we keep our focus? How do we work efficiently? We're going to discuss that, a little bit of red zone, and some practice considerations here with Craig Stutzmann, who is the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at San Jose State. Craig, it's great to have you back here on the podcast. It's been a while.
Coach, thanks for having me on, man. It's always a blast getting on these podcasts and talking ball with you. And that's funny because I'll go ahead and get on Spotify and listen to some of the stuff and some of the past guys you had. And yesterday on my walk, I was listening to, I think it was Alex Mortensen, and he was talking a little bit about stuff. And so not only is it great to be on, but I love listening to your show as well.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it. So the idea we're talking about, and you're now working with Coach Ken, Sundays off, something that he's done. He's talked about that here on the podcast before. But when we think about all the things we do as coaches, especially post-pandemic, when we learned to work virtually, there's a lot we can do to still be efficient, still get our game planning done, but kind of step away from the day-to-day grind.
Absolutely. I always think that in person is the greatest thing. But, when you talk about being fresh and how do you have those breaks, and it's not just on those Thursdays, and in high school, it's the Wednesdays or whatever it is to have date night with your wife and your loved ones. It really comes down to like having that Sunday off. And I've done that, a few years ago at Utah Tech with Coach Peterson. We had those Sundays off. And I think the misperception is like, you don't do anything. What it is you just don't go into the office and you kind of roll on your own. What I felt, and what was the greatest thing for me was like, I got up at say 8, 9 in the morning the next day on a Sunday. And I'm like, I got to get back to football. But at the same time too, I get up and my wife is there. My son is there. Maybe we cook a little bit of breakfast and I'm sitting at the dining table and I'm just doing my work from there. And I felt a lot more efficient, fresh. I did more. I watched probably more film because I was able to take like after 2 hours or whatever it is, I'd go on a walk with my wife or take my son outside and we'd go throw the ball around. They come back in. And so I was a lot more present for my family. I felt a lot more fresh and it just seemed a lot more efficient. And what we did back in, I think, 2016 at the University of Hawaii that helps this, we came up with those game plan questions. I think a couple of years ago, social media, Nick Saban, right, that whole thing about game plan questions, each position coach and even support staff has whatever, it could be 5, it could be 10 questions up on the opponent that you're playing. And so we use that. And I started doing that on Sundays at Utah Tech, and it gave a lot of direction to the other coaches. And what we found was when we came back Monday morning, we had more ideas. And it wasn't one of those things where you're like a zombie and you're just like, oh my gosh, man, I can't remember. Who are we playing again? The green team. I think we're playing a green team or, whatever it is. And you're able to get a little bit more of a head start. And you talked about this, even with the travel when you come back.
Right.
Sometimes you get back at midnight. Sometimes you get back at 2 or 3 in the morning. And if you got a start time at, say, noon, that's a pretty bad turnaround considering you just got done with the game and you're all emotionally drained and you got to go ahead and go back in. And I mean, I remember at the University of Hawaii, we get in at sometimes 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning on Sunday. We got to come back at noon and you're like, I can't even go to sleep. Why even go to sleep? Let's just go to the office and just get a head start. And so having Sundays off is a blessing. I think it's great. And I know as a football coach, you feel like I can't do that because we got to get a head start. I promise you, take those Sundays off and you kind of roll your own. Man, it's great.
Yeah, I look at the evolution of it. And I remember back when I was coaching high school ball, we were still tied to the office because Huddle had not come about yet. We hadn't at that point broken film out of the film room. You think of days even earlier than that. I mean, because you could still, depending on your era, copy a VHS tape or DVD and bring those home and do some things. But you go back before that, I mean, there was the projector, right? There was that one projector in the program. Nobody had that at home. And so you're in there with all those guys staring at the screen for hours. And I mean, it's difficult, especially like you said, with the short turnaround times. I'm thinking back when I'm coaching high school ball and we're in the field house and we're getting to about midday and just like being physically dead and going into the training room and sleeping on a training table for like 30 minutes, right? And the opposite of that is taking that Sunday off, or if you're a high school coach, even that Saturday, if it's possible, to work on your own. We think about this all the time about our players. And we would not go and sit them in a room for hours on end to make them do their work, their mental work. Like we look at giving them short breaks, stepping away from things, making sure that we move things along in our meeting rooms. Yet as coaches, we're guilty of working that way and thinking that, oh, well, that doesn't apply to my brain, right? Because you need it. Go work in a sprint for 45 minutes to an hour and then step away and do some things completely different. Throw the ball around with your son or take a walk with your wife and then sit back down to it. And you'll be surprised at just how fresh you are and how the ideas now start to come together for you, where when you're sitting in that room with everybody watching film, you kind of feel brain dead at times.
Absolutely. I would say some of the light bulb moments that I had in my career has been when I was in the middle of the day going for a workout or going for a little jog around. And all of a sudden I'm like, or in the summertime being home in Hawaii and surfing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why don't we do this? And all of a sudden it's like you said, you just got to step away and your brain just, I don't know what it is, man. Maybe it's sunlight, maybe it's fresh air, but the biggest thing has been being able to take a step back and come up with some different thoughts and ideas and just feel fresh and like, man, we probably should do this a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. You make me jealous. I'm just talking about going for a walk with the wife and surfing. But,
yeah, that's only a couple of times, in the summertime when we're back home. But
right. Well, the other aspect of it, as you mentioned, is those questions that there is direction for the work as well. And for our listeners, maybe who haven't seen that Nick Saban piece, could you give us an example, maybe for one position, of what those questions might be, a few of the questions and the things that they're looking at, and how that drives the work?
Yeah. So for, say, like a running backs coach, right? For our offense, they're very dialed into protections. They're dialed into pressures. They're dialed into really the core of the defense. So For our running backs coach, some of his questions could be, where do they like to bring pressures from? More field, more boundary, more down the middle of the pipe, the formation? Are they a little bit six-man pressures? Are they a three down and they're just trying to bring five? Who's their best pass rusher? Are there specific looks in the red zone, or where does it change in the red zone that the personality might change and you might get a little bit more pressure? So a lot of things for a running backs coach is more geared towards the pressure piece, the blitzes and all that type of stuff. For offensive line, a lot of it's that front four, front three, front, whatever you want to do, whoever we're playing, what type of end are they versus a zone read? Are they a squeeze team, or are they more of a surf team? Who's their best pass rusher in the D line? Are there specific stunts or things that we haven't seen that they do that we got to get ready for? And same thing, like in the red zone, does he see? I like to have probably the same question for two or three different coaches, especially when we get into situational football, like third downs, red zone, goal line, and even end of game and end of half, because I think there's sometimes that one guy might see something a little bit different, or he might not catch it. And so that's what we do. I know for receiver coaches, they're clued into the coverage. So who's their best cover guy? Are they more of a heavy press or motor technique team? What safety do they like to drop down in coverage, and so on and so forth? And where those guys line up, are they field based and boundary based, or are they a man team that kind of, they put that corner on the best receiver, and does he follow them around? So all those little things that when it comes down to it in the week, and really, does it change the plays that we run? Not so much. It could give us maybe one or two wrinkles that we could throw in to potentially take advantage of it. The other thing too is really to get the scout team dialed in, so they can give us the best possible look that week going into the game. So our guys can, the first time they line up, it's been simulated where, hey, this guy travels, so maybe we have a jersey for this guy. And it clues us into potential coverage checks that we see. And our quarterback has a better idea of what he's going to get post snap. And so I think all those things are really important to the preparation of our game plan, and also just like the scout team piece.
You mentioned the red zone, and before we got going, you talked about your fence, the spread and shred, as you called it. You and I talked about it years ago on the podcast, how its origins in the run and shoot and how it's evolved there. But the way that you guys do things really allowing you to carry more of your, call them base plays, but carry those into the red zone. And then also, you always look for, where's the break point of this defensive coordinator? Where does he change as the ball starts getting closer to the goal line? And there's been some things trending that way that have been a little bit different in recent years as well.
Yeah, it's funny because going back to what you said about our offensive system, it allows us, because it has its run and shoot principles where everything is based off of defense and how it's organic. It'll morph to this type of play or this type of route combination, depending on what coverage you see. So we don't really have a lot of specific plays that we put in just for that game week. Like I said, that allows us to get a lot more reps at what we do and get really, really good at it versus what the defense is going to give us. It's funny that you mentioned the red zone, because that's the one thing I think over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years that been trending a certain way. And I've called a lot of buddies of mine in the profession, especially defensive guys. Where does the defense change for you? Some guys say in the high red to that mid red area to, let's say, the 25 to the 13-yard line. They're like, it's just regular defense. You know what I mean? We're not going to do anything different. Once we get to the 12-yard line, we're going to go ahead and play and use that back line, that 12th defender as an extra defender. So the personality is going to change. Some guys say it changes at 9. In talking with my brother, getting ready for the season, as offensive guys and as coaches, you want to put things in boxes, like round numbers, like, hey, goal line is from the goal line to the 4. And then low red is, or whatever, it's from the 5 to the 10. And then you got the 11 to the 16 is that mid red zone. And then you got the high red after that. But you know what? Like, life doesn't happen in round numbers. It's not so black and white. So all of a sudden, in talking with like 5 different coordinators this past summer, 4 of them had different answers of where that cutoff is for them. So I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, well, guess what? We're not going to put those numbers at it. We're going to go ahead while we're watching the film on Sundays is find where that break point is for every guy. And being able to identify that defenses are taking a little bit more advantage of the space in the red zone, the lack of space offensively. We've adjusted to practice more red zone plays. Because I look back in the past, or red zone time, I should say, we didn't get to red zone till Wednesdays. Well, red zone is a critical piece. Like the difference between a field goal and a touchdown is 4 points. And if you look at that over the course of maybe 3 or 4 series that you settle for field goals rather than get touchdowns, that adds up. That's a lot of points that you're leaving on the table. And since the defense is dedicating more time to it, as an offense, we got to dedicate more time to it. Like in golf, right? Your short irons and your wedges, that's your scoring clubs. It's just like, that's the way I think about it in offense. That red zone is your short irons and your wedges. That's your scoring clubs. Like you got to be really, really good at that and you got to put a lot of time in it. So we start dedicating that time from Monday and we piece it in all the way through because there might be some things that doesn't look good on Monday. You're like, well, let's throw it out or let's tweak it rather than wait till Wednesday. You're like, I don't know if I really want to tweak some of the stuff. And then your short plays, or you don't feel really good in that area. And that's where we at San Jose State has trended to be a little bit more, put more time into the red zone starting on Mondays.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Yeah, I think as you look at it too, historically, you hit around the 20, you started to see a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I think just the level of the quarterbacks had, even going to the high school level, has changed over time. I know we were watching some old games on the Big Ten Network this past weekend and watching the passing game of these 2 Big Ten teams who were really good that year and saying, oh my God, this looks like a bad high school passing game, right? Like they weren't threading the needle. They would make some, big plays and whatever, but the passing game wasn't the emphasis that it is now. So you start that pressure too early. You don't have the 12th defender, right? So you got to think of, all right, how can we eliminate the explosive here? Because from an offensive perspective, my thought was always that too. If I can score from a little bit farther out where I don't have to have receivers adjusting routes because of the end line, that's just better for us too. So it was always kind of planning those shots in there and also knowing like, hey, maybe we're going to get man covered, no help for this guy where we can focus on that one-on-one. So it's a little bit different in the mentality now.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I go to Texas State last year with those guys, right? And the previous year at UIW, I mean, they led the whole country in everything, every offensive category. And then we're watching that film. And then we're also watching the Tennessee Volunteers film when Jalen Hyatt and Hooker was the quarterback there. And they're leading the whole country in offense as well. And so I'm like, I wonder what they do in the red zone. Not many clips in the red zone. They're scoring from outside the red zone, And it's funny. I asked Mac Leftwich, who's the OC at Texas State. I said, what you guys do in the red zone? He's like, oh yeah, we were really good. And after we watched the film, I'm like, dude, you guys scored all from outside the red zone pretty much. Now they had some cool little plays within the red zone, but point being, like you said, is try to score from outside the red zone. But again, defenses are getting smarter. They're starting to try to eliminate those explosive plays from scoring outside the red zone, use that space to their advantage. And so it's funny, like we started doing our summer workouts with our players, and let me track back a little bit. So I go ahead and hit up the PFF guys and I said, all right, last season, can you give me the percentages in specific zones of the field? And I think it was like from the high red down to the goal line, it was somewhere around 27%. So I'm a big proponent of you should practice what the game reflects. So if 25 to 30% is in the red zone, we should be dedicating 25 to 30% of practice in the red zone. So we've adjusted that even in the summertime of adjusting that. Like if they're going to throw their own routes, make sure that they're getting about 25 to 30% of red zone type throws. because all of a sudden we just practice it on Wednesday and maybe touch it on Thursday. They're supposed to be perfect on Saturday night or Saturday. Well, guess what? As we know, that's the hardest time to throw the football is when you're in the red zone. So you got to practice it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's even going back to high school days, making sure you run your 7-on-7s down there during the week as well, right? Instead of just, hey, it's 7-on-7 period. We're practicing in the middle of the field or 40 going in or whatever it might be, that bring it closer, work all those things going up. Don't just sit on the 25 and say, oh, we're practice red zone, like get tighter with it.
Right. Absolutely. Because there are things that we do inside the 10 or the 12 that we may not do in the field. And so that kind of almost conflicts with what I said earlier about our offense and our system, especially in the pass and the run game. You could run it anywhere on the field. Well, I think there's certain things that you can run down in the tight red goal line, but you got to be a little bit more creative in terms of the depth or the timing of it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Looking at the practice side of things, you shared with me, I think it's an idea that's been around. I've seen it done before. I've never actually done it, but double huddling, what you're doing against your scout team, and it's way you do it, especially that allows you to develop depth. We'd love to hear just what you're doing with the double huddle in practice.
Yeah, it really all started back in, I want to say 2018 at the University of Hawaii. We had two really good quarterbacks. We had Cole McDonald, who was going to be a sophomore, redshirt sophomore. And we had an incoming freshman, Chevin Cordero, who those guys were going through camp and they were lights out. And so we're saying, like, who's going to be the starter? It was really splitting hairs at the close of camp, getting ready for Colorado State. And we just thought about it. We're like, well, why don't we do the double huddles? And Corey Batoon, who's not in Missouri, he was our DC. He was the one that really was a big proponent of, hey, let's double huddle to get more reps. So we said, hey, let's do the double huddles. And that way we can get Chevin and Cole equal amount of reps. And then we could throw them into different huddles. So we might have group one with the starters and group two with the backups. And it started with just getting those guys used to playing with both groups, just in case we had to make a switch in the game. And then we started seeing like, hey, we got 3 linemen that rotate a lot in the game. Well, let's go ahead and practice it. Throw those 3 linemen in group 2 and group 1 and throw them back there so they can create chemistry with the starters and with the second group. And then we're like, hey, why don't we do that with some of the receivers? Because our receivers, it's a relationship-based offense. Like, they got to be able to work with one another on these concepts. So let's start mixing that up a little bit. And what you started to see was in the games when we had to put the backups in, they were far more ahead of what we were in the past, where before guys would get in and like, oh my gosh, well, what do we expect? We play 99% of the snaps with these 4 receivers or these 5 linemen. And now when a guy has got to go in, gosh, he sticks out like a sore thumb, you know? And then what it also did was we felt more comfortable, players felt more comfortable, and we developed a lot more depth and a lot more guys were able to rotate in. And we just felt like we were fresher on the back end because we played 13 games back then, and to go to bowl game, you got 14. And in one year, we played 15 games because we went to the Mountain West Championship game. So trying to keep these guys fresh was a premium, and then how to get those guys reps. And it was a great idea. And we do it to, like, right now, we're going to do the same thing, because being able to get those guys comfortable with multiple players is critical in that development and being able to win a championship.
When you take that approach, are you guys running the exact same play with both groups against the exact same defense?
Yes, exact same play. And our O-line coach before, Mark Weber, right? He'd tell the lineman, like, how can you mess this up? Like, you're in the second group, just watch the first group. Like, the pressure's coming versus this run or whatever. Well, guess what? Like, you're in the second group, you get up there, you already know you should look better than the starters because you have an idea of what's coming. And in that way, you just have like, everybody is on the same page. Everybody knows. But yeah, definitely run the same plays. And so the second guys can have an idea and see it. And then also, like, you know, all of a sudden you go at the end of the week, if you mix up the plays all the time, then you might be like, gosh, the second group versus they only got this versus odd front maybe 2 times. That's not good.
Right. How are you managing the logistics of your scout team? Because obviously those guys are taking on a lot of reps if they stay out there. How do you, those guys are, I guess, fresh for you as that practice goes on?
Yeah, you got to be very aware of what's going on. And whether it's every 4, every 8, every 6 plays, just hold the offense, be like, hey, let's get some water. And you can tell when those guys are starting to get gas. Like, hey, hold the water, boom, water goes out. 30 seconds, get it off, and then we're rolling again. And then there's sometimes too, middle of the season, say some guys get injured and you lose a couple of scout team guys. You got some coaches playing some scout team, right? So, and I remember when I was coaching high school, we had 4 coaches on scout team giving scout team looks. But there's sometimes that maybe you do tempo and you just got to be creative. Maybe you got your double huddles for out of that 15 minutes in that period. You do it for 10 minutes, and then that last 5, you take the scout team off, and you're just tempoing it down a little bit more of a condition stuff, or just tempo, and you don't need the scout guys, and you're just running plays down the field. So we've done it a lot of different ways. Not to say that every scout team has been shotgun, but a large majority of it is the shotgun, and then we'll go ahead and sometimes drive the field with it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of great ideas you share with us here today that'll help coaches as we head through this 2024 season. So I appreciate you coming back on the podcast. Great to see you here, and best of luck to you and the Spartans in 2024.
Thanks for having me on. Always great to be on with you, and good luck to you this season as well, Coach.
Here's our winningest takeaway from this episode with Coach Stutzmann. I think the biggest thing in this one is as we get into the grind of the season, especially halfway through and getting into the later weeks of the season, it's okay to step away from what we know as the grind to allow your mind to reset. And that often leads to some breakthroughs and creativity in your solutions. I think whether that's going for a walk, spending time with your family, getting away from football completely, taking time away from that intense focus will help you return with a fresh perspective and allow you to solve problems more effectively and come up with some innovative ideas. Thank you again for supporting the Coach and Coordinator podcast. As you know, we want to support coaches at all levels by providing insight into the mindset and the skill set of the best coaches. We also want to share the best tools and technology that they use, and you can find those in our 10% toolkit. The link is in the show notes. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.